Thank you. Glad to be here. Thanks for sticking with the conference. It's always harder in the afternoon, so glad you guys are strong in here. Fun topic. I love UTOPIA. I love fiber. I love what it brings. I want to give you a little bit of an idea what UTOPIA is, but the main topic is this advancements in VR technologies that have changed and advanced over recent history. And it's really fun stuff. If you didn't have a chance to see our booth, I'd invite you to come and visit us at our office. We have kind of a fun, I'll talk about this in a minute, but we have kind of a fun virtual reality rig over here and some things we can show you. First off, let me tell you a little bit about UTOPIA if you don't know what that is. We're an 11-city project. So 11 cities in UTOPIA said, hey, we do not have the infrastructure we need. They took the initiative, they created this project. These are the member cities of the project. We didn't start with gigabit connections to the homes. It started with 100 megabits. But things have changed, things have advanced. So now we're up to gigabit or better to any connection. It's also not GPON. So all of the other fiber to the home networks in Utah are GPON, shared infrastructure, and we have dedicated fiber connections. So it's more of a carrier class connection all the way down to residential customers. Kind of cool. One thing very unique about UTOPIA Fiber, it's an open access infrastructure, and people say, what in the world is that? To explain what that is the cities have built this as just like they would roads or airports, something where they would allow others to come in and use that. So rather than run the airlines, your city would build an airport and all the airlines come in and they utilize that infrastructure from the city. Well, we do the same thing with fiber. So we're not the ISP, we're not your provider. We build this infrastructure and then we allow other companies to come and provide the services on our network. So if you're a UTOPIA subscriber, you're also a subscriber of one of these companies, or there's many on here that aren't even on this slide. We have over 25 that utilize it. So there's competition, which is a great thing. And then just a quick map overview of where we're at. It's all the way that, if you're not familiar with the terrain very much, the very top of that would be Tremont City, where you can get the service throughout the city. Brigham City, Perry comes down. You've got Layton, Centerville, Midvale Murray, here, West Valley City, Linden, Orem, and Payson, and the backbone that connects those, and lots of connections for cities and other things in between. That is the UTOPIA system. Now we're going to talk about virtual reality, because there are some connections here. You need to have a good network to support virtual reality applications as they've advanced, and we're going to talk about which ones and why. But in the past, this has mostly been kind of an entertainment thing. There's been gaming, which is really cool, and we'll talk about that. But that's kind of what's driven the advancement with virtual reality. But there's some new cool stuff. So on the gaming side, I got to mention this company called The Void in Linden, Utah. They have what they call hyper reality, which is basically taking what this virtual reality that we're familiar with a little bit, and just added everything you can do in there. So they've got mobility, so you actually have all the stuff on you and you can walk around a room and it keeps track of where you're at. It keeps track of other people in the room. It renders the whole environment around you. And you have walls, so you actually walk up to a real wall, but you see it in the virtual reality environment. And there's doorknobs, and the doorknob you see in the virtual reality environment is a real doorknob. You can open doors, you have air. Anyways, they have this thing in New York, this Ghostbusters experience where they have built this hyper reality environment. And I'm being kind of a geek myself. I went to New York recently. Most people go to New York, say, I want to go see the Statue of Liberty, I want to go see this. I'm like, I need to go see the Voids thing. I need to go do that virtual reality experience. And I went, and so that's the geek here and the get up right here when I was there. And it was a blast, but I was just amazed. I mean, you got your little gun, which is your photon blaster thing in Ghostbusters, whatever it's called, and you see the other people that you're playing with. And it was amazing, a really amazing virtual reality experience that they've been able to build, and we'll continue to see advancement there. So what does that have to do with broadband and how that affects networks? Well, that's one application of virtual reality. Another one is what we call live VR streaming or virtual reality streaming. What this is you can take this captured virtual reality environment and then send it to somewhere else. So what you do is, if you have one of these rigs here, and I've got one here, and this one here has these 6 GoPros on it. Well, each GoPro is capable of 4K resolution. So you can capture an environment, and then you got to take all these 4K images and stick them together. And so there's software that does that, and we demonstrate that over in our booth, but if you are interested, you could come visit us at Utopia and we show you. But the software will take all these different video feeds and compile them together and stitch it. It's called stitch, live video encoding and stitching, I guess, image stitching. And you get this composite image, which is the combination of all these images around you. And a more sophisticated system than this would have 2 cameras in every direction. And so with the 2 cameras in every direction, you get a 3D version. It's a very immersive experience because you're looking around. Well, what do you do with that? How's that useful? Well, you can watch that on one of these little goggle things here. This is probably the most popular one. It's the Gear VR. The headset itself only costs about $100, but you just put a Samsung phone in it. So it's actually very consumer accessible, especially if you already have the phone. But you have Oculus, you have HTC Vive, you have a whole bunch of people coming out with new consumer-priced, consumer-grade devices to view this stuff in. So what do you do with that? You have these new companies coming out and saying, hey, there's an opportunity here. This is an amazing experience with hardly any content. Let's go get some content. So what we have, probably the #1 right now in live virtual reality streaming is a company called NextVR. And they've got rights to lots of events for sports and concerts and different things. They're not doing these other ones, but you could think, hey, there's application here for emergency services and surveillance and who knows what, right? We have this really cool tool, and we're coming up with the applications that can utilize that tool. Well, what they've just recently got is they got rights. They're doing 1 game per week, NBA games. So last night, you probably were watching something else, but the Phoenix Suns game was on in live virtual reality streaming. You could have watched that. And it's really cool. And it's a little bit difficult to talk about this and not demonstrate it, but there's really no way to demonstrate it to a room. But really what you do is you put these goggles on, and you're right there courtside, and it's a 3D look, and you look around and you can see everything next to you. You can see the crowds, the people next to you eating popcorn. And LeBron James is standing here next to you, and he throws the ball in, and then somebody, dunks it. But you're seeing that live. I mean, that's the amazing thing about this, is it can be sent to you live. It's not some collection of images that's post-processed, and they create some experience. It's a live broadcast of a virtual reality environment. We've never been able to do that before. This is a new thing that's come out because the equipment and all those dependencies, if I went back to here, the cameras are capable of it. The software and computers are capable to do the stitching at that speed, and then it used to be able to do that and keep up with it. Well, the networks are getting there. UTOPIA certainly is there. And the end user viewing devices have advanced greatly to make it a good experience and make it cost effective. So we're kind of in the first generation of this stuff. It's getting better. I'll talk about that here in a second. So anyways, you got NBA basketball games. They had a football game, but they didn't do the whole game. It was just highlights. They had tennis championships. They did the Kentucky Derby was a really fun one to look at. So if you get one of these Gear VR devices, you just go in there and there's an app and you can go in there and look at all this content they have. And it is a blast. I just wish I could pass it around the room and have everybody try this, but that'd be over my time by a lot. So what do you need for this from a broadband perspective? Because this is, we never thought about this when these networks were built, right? In fact, we run into that all the time. We built fiber to parks throughout West Valley City and Layton, some other cities, and we put it on this, this amazing Wi-Fi coverage fed with the fiber connections. So we don't really know what people are going to do. And all of a sudden, the next thing we know, you have Pokemon, Pokemon Go, and everybody's in the parks going around on their phones, and we see the utilization skyrocket on our Wi-Fi in the parks, and we're like, hey, this is great. We had no idea people were going to be doing this when we built these networks, right? But these applications just keep coming out, and when you have the bandwidth, then people will show up and start using that. Well, this is one of those that's kind of shown up, is we've got devices and networks that can support it. But the big asterisk goes on there is the networks today support the current generation of this. The current generation of this is not what it will be soon. The current generation, you have 1080p display resolution on your devices. So this Samsung Gear VR, it's essentially a 1080p display, and you get half of that per eye as you're using it. And that's not exactly the right resolution, but it's close to that. So that's what you're building towards. Well, your source video, you have, this rig does 1080p per camera. Cameras are actually capable of 4K, but they only output live off the HDMI outputs 1080p. So that's your source imagery, and it all gets put together in some big composite image, and so that combined image ends up being about a 4K resolution image. And so you're streaming a 4K video. What does 4K video take? It kind of depends on your compression, but it easily takes 20 megabits or more. If you do a 3D version, it takes a little bit more than that. There's a lot of networks that can support that. But the problem here is that the number one complaint of using it today is you say, this is really fun, but it just isn't as sharp as it should be. And that's because of the resolution of these devices. The next generation of these devices, and they've already had 4K resolution phones come out, we're going to see a lot more of that. And maybe you're going to see an 8K resolution phone. You say it doesn't do any good looking at your phone to have that kind of resolution. But when you put that phone this close to your face, and you put a lens on each one of those that actually makes it comfortable to be looking at your phone at that distance, 4K makes a big difference. And it will make a significant improvement to the whole experience of doing virtual reality. And it really won't cost anymore. The devices are already there. In fact, Sony released a 4K resolution phone, and it bombed because they said, what do you do with that resolution? And that was before virtual reality was getting this momentum. So the next generation of this stuff, you say, well, camera resolutions, you know, those cameras already, that's the 4, and they have a GoPro 5, and you're going to start seeing newer cameras, and they're pushing the resolutions. You're going to see those start pushing up to 8K. So your source images, your source images are 4K, stereoscopic. You start putting all these big images together to create that really ultra high resolution version. What does that video look like? You know, when you combine all that into one video feed, it's probably going to be something like a 16K resolution video, which is ridiculous. You know, no one has a screen that's 16K today. But you got to remember, you're only looking at 4K of what would probably be an image that's far bigger than what you're actually looking at when you're looking at a virtual reality environment. So you actually do need a resolution of video streaming that far exceeds the display resolution of your device. And you're probably going to need something like 150 megabits to support that. And that's not out 5 years. That's out like in the next year. You're going to see the devices end to end and the systems that can support that, and it's going to be awesome. Except that your internet connections aren't going to keep up with it, unless you're on the right infrastructure. So that's why really the application here is to say, well, what do you do if you've got a gig or 10 gig of fiber? You're no problem. And so you see there's a lot of advancement going on in upgrading networks and trying to keep up with that. But this is a specific application that did not exist only a few years ago. And even the current generation of it isn't really pushing that threshold a lot. I mean, some networks struggle at 30 meg, but 150 meg, most people in the room probably don't have that. Maybe there's a mix. Hopefully you all live in UTOPIA cities, and that's not a problem. So anyways, I just got to cover that. I think it's an exciting new technology. You're going to see a lot of stress on networks if they're not keeping up with the standards, but that was a presentation. We try to keep it simple and painless, but that's it. And we don't do questions, so, right? I'm okay. Thank you. Please feel free to reach out to us if you have any questions or want to do a follow-up, or even, like I said, if you want to come and actually try some of the stuff out, we have it set up in our office. You could come have a virtual reality experience. So.